Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews, where I like to explore the world of fountain pens and ink and paper and all that stuff. And today, it's a combo. I have been requested several times lately to let you know how it is that I do these chromatography strips, and it's really, really simple. And, if you're just getting into fountain pen inks and things like that, I think it's both fun and a bit educational to see what base colors really make up some of your favorite inks. It's just kind of a fascinating peek behind the curtain, so to speak, into the ink world. And when I show you how to do this, you're going to be surprised at what a simple process it really is. So, of course, the first step is to get a strip of paper. And what I like to use is this calligraphy paper that I picked up at Daiso. It comes in 60 sheets. It's the Specialty Calligraphy Paper. It works great for chromatography. And with 60 giant sheets of paper, I probably have enough to do 100 years worth of chromatographies for under $2. But if you don't have a Daiso near you, do not worry about it at all. Or, as our local postman likes to say, do not fret. There is no cause for fretting. All you have to do is get a coffee filter. I suggest the cone ones. You just get more use out of each one, and cut your pieces of paper to the size that you want to use for your chromatography. And it's just as simple as that. The coffee filters work very, very well, and there's no use going out and trying to hunt down a special paper. So I cut it out in these strips. Then I grab a handy-dandy ballpoint pen. Yeah, I know, you're probably thinking, ballpoint pen? Are you kidding me? But listen, it's not a problem because, hey, form follows function, get the best tool for the job, and in this case, I think a ballpoint pen for labeling the strip is the best thing. So today's ink is going to be Lamy Cliff 2024. That's this bottle right here. I haven't had it all that long. It's kind of a blue-black, blackberry, little hint of purple, possibly sort of an ink. And it will be interesting to see the chromatography on this one. The other thing that you need to have is, I'm going to say, a water source. And let me just show you a little bit of an interesting comparison that I did earlier today. I've always used distilled water for my chromatography. Some other people use denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol. So I was curious about which might do the better job of chromatography. The argument for using denatured alcohol is that it can break down some of the solids within the ink and help them to separate out a little bit better. I think, honestly, that's probably especially true on the ballpoint, and if I were going to do a chromatography of ballpoint ink, that's definitely what I would use, not distilled water. But with fountain pen ink, I've always used distilled. So I compared 4 different liquids to see what the differences would be. So the first one that I did was my normal distilled water. The ink here is Call of Cthulhu by Waringal, and very interesting ink. Lots of colors going on there. You can see deep blues, then the green as it crosses into the yellow, and then turning orange as it crosses into some pink, and then you get just a little bit of diluted gray down to where I had written a line, but a very dynamic chromatography. This is with distilled water. I like distilled because there are just fewer contaminants to mess up my chromatography, and when water is distilled, it leaches things out of rocks and soil and mineral or paper and ink, and I just find it's very, very good at doing a chromatography with fountain pen inks. And as you can see, really dynamic in the way that it pulled the colors out here. Next, I went with isopropyl alcohol because some had suggested that the alcohol would do a better job. Look how different these two chromatographies are. It really only pulled out the blue, and since blue and yellow makes green, the yellow and green parts of the ink, and other colors like the pink, which of course is just a diluted red, did not show up in this chromatography at all. And I found that, interestingly enough, it didn't wick up the paper nearly as well as the distilled water. And of course it evaporates quickly, and that may be part of what's going on here, but it just didn't get the full dynamic spectrum of the ink. It is a beautiful chromatography. I mean, that looks really cool, but there's more to this ink than that. Some of these other shades are the shades that come out when this particular ink sheens. And so I'd rather get a chromatography that also brings out those colors that contribute toward the sheen or the shading of an ink. Now that made me curious. Some other people use a 3-to-1 distilled water or tap water and isopropyl alcohol or denatured alcohol, and that didn't have that much of a difference. Pretty much either one of those work, but if I can get this good a result without having to bother with using yet another liquid, well, I'm just going to stick with this. But that also made me wonder about tap water. Tap water has some different properties. It has some chlorine in it and some other things. How different would it be? Well, as you can see here, it actually did bring out even a little bit more, but that distilled sample is more vibrant. So that's kind of interesting. I would call these pretty much a tie with a little bit of a variation there. And basically what I've decided is I can use tap if I need to, but I'm going to stick with my distilled when I have it. So here we are. Here's a little bit of distilled water, which brings us to the next step. Gather your distilled water in an easy little container to dip that in, which is like almost anything. Then grab your strip of paper. And I happen to have Lamy Cliff in my Diplomat Viper. And the next step is simply to draw a line about here across that paper. Let it get plenty of ink. Probably should have had something under there in case it went through. Then get your water. And you're just going to dip this. Don't go up to the ink, but just dip that into the water and let it soak up. Like 10 to 15 seconds usually does the job. I usually kind of wait until it starts to get to the water and start spreading just a little bit, and then you just let it do its thing. Now what I like to do instead of holding it is to find a way to hang that, suspend it in the air, and I leave it there until it dries. All right, not quite dry, but definitely good enough for our purposes here. Check that out. You see how easy that was? And this is an interesting chromatography. So you have the expected dark blue and a really bright blue that looks great, and as I mentioned, kind of blackberry tones. Check that out. Definite purple tones. So red and blue makes purple. You know what's going on there. And of course you can see distinctly on this one where I drew that line because there is a base black ink behind this. So really interesting chromatography on the Lamy Cliff 2024. And it really is that simple to do your own chromatographies. Just a slip of paper, distilled water, and a few minutes. And you get more insight into what makes up your favorite ink. Cool stuff. Go try it, and God bless you, and have a great day.